Hello, I'm Tim Wilde, and I'm going to give you my wild thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 1, Stranger in a Strange Land. And first of all, I just got to say, I love the character Boba Fett. I am not one of those people that subscribe to the idea that he just looks cool, and he has a cool helmet and cool vibes, and that's the only thing that made him awesome. I could go into what makes him awesome from everything he did in the movies, because everyone says he didn't do anything except for have a lame death in the movies. Wrong. He had a lot of cool stuff that he did. I've always been a big fan of Boba Fett. That's why I had mixed feelings about how he was in The Mandalorian. I didn't feel that the character was necessarily Boba Fett in character. It was fine. I'm not going to get into that. I already did those discussions a long time ago on Saints on Cinema, but I'm just going to say that this character in this show does not feel like Boba Fett we saw from Return of the Jedi crawling out of the Sarlacc pit. Spoilers, he crawls kind of out of the Sarlacc pit. I'm going to spoil some stuff in this one if you haven't seen it, but everyone obviously knows that he's back because it's called the Book of Boba Fett. But this is my Powers of the Force back from the 90s, early 90s when they they started redoing the Star Wars figures. I still keep my Boba Fett. Awesome pose, cool playable features on this one. That collection was not very good for playabilities. I have that right here on my Bounty Hunter. See, even my Boba Fett comics. Right here, ready to go. All my Boba Fett stuff, a lot of it is right there, including my, from that stupid Nintendo game, or that Wii game with where you buy the little characters. I kept this one because it's freaking cool. And I have other Boba Fett stuff. And the only Pez dispenser I own is a Boba Fett Pez dispenser. Love Boba Fett. Met Jeremy Bulloch, who played Boba Fett in the original trilogy, two movies, when he came here to FanX a couple years ago before he died, and it was a very exciting moment for me because I got to meet him, talk to him for a few minutes because there was no one else in line, and I got to spend a good 3-4 minutes talking to him about the experience of him performing Boba Fett and what he brought to it, the coolness of him, not just the look, but I mean his being quiet, his being subtle, him not having to act and project himself verbally as being like he's all bad and everything. A lot of the stuff that just little nods and little gestures and things like that make Boba Fett so iconic and awesome. That came from Jeremy Bulloch. So I gotta say, I've always been a huge fan of the character, and I love in the 90s they had in the Star Wars, this is the new one from the Legends series, but you can buy the Mandalorian armor, it's the trilogy about Boba Fett's return from the Sarlacc pit. He was saved by Dengar in that story, and his taking out the entire Bounty Hunter Guild. Pretty awesome series, and I remember my mom listening to that all the time in the car on her audiobooks, and I just love the character, and they used to do some awesome stuff before Disney bought it, rewrote it, and now this is what we have. Is it awful? No. Is it true to the character? I don't think so, but it's okay. The first episode is called Stranger in a Strange Land. This brought back a lot of vibes that I still have from the old role-playing books, my old movie trilogy role-playing book from the West End Games. Very old stuff, again from the 90s, which a lot of the cool stuff that everyone loves about the Mandalorian series and stuff, I found a lot of stuff comes from the inspiration, I think, from a lot of that canon. Those were the books, that Star Wars universe from the role-playing game from West End Games. That was all there was for the great authors like Timothy Zahn and Kathy Tyers and others in the 90s to write the great books like Heir to the Empire and those that everyone loves and goes back to saying that felt like their Star Wars. And then Disney bought it, erased all of that, and started the new canon. But a lot of things now, the things that everyone likes the most, and a lot of things from the Mandalorian series were inspired by a lot of things that came from those books. And it's very similar. I'm not going to give a lot of examples, but I pulled out after I finished this episode. There's a little story in here, just a little short story about a fictitious rebel archaeologist who is going back and tracing the events of the things that happened in universe of the original trilogy. It's a character that's just kind of archive and gather information from what had happened on the journey of Luke and Han and Leia and everyone. And so that was the format they take for in this role-playing book, that they have little snippets. God, look how old this is. My pages are all falling apart here. They would just have little clips like this. You can see there's a This is like, here's the stats on the Probot and the Wampa ice creature, and here's a little story in this box that Han Solo gave an interview or whatever to this archaeologist and would talk about some story that was not in canon, not in the movies, not in the books or anything, just in these games. One of them was about her venture to the archaeologist's venture to the Sarlacc pit. And while she was there was a Jabba sand crawler crawled up to it, and they were scavenging what they could from the wreckage of the vehicle of the sail barge that exploded. Not much was salvageable, and it talked about how she had to hide her speeder so she could sneak up, because they would just take whatever they could and rob from people, just like they did in the show. And she went in and talked to the Jawas, and then she found something shiny like in the dirt, and they pulled up, and it was a plate that was smooth on one side and had a lot of blaster shots on the other side. She later took that to Han Solo to ask him about it, and he said that was Boba Fett's armor, so implying that Boba Fett's stuff either was regurgitated out, and in this story the Sarlacc pit was still alive, or it was a Easter egg that that possibly Boba Fett had escaped. This idea has been going for a really long time, even back in the original Marvel comics. There were stories about Boba Fett escaping. They retold the story in this book, which was fantastic, where Dengar helps him out, and this time it had the tongue from the special edition. Nonsense. The stupid mouth was just terrible. The worm face. Dumb idea. But I did like that they recapture or kind of retold that. It would have been cool for them to elaborate a little bit more, but it was fine. It's not a big complaint. But one thing that was cool about how they did this in this story was they came back to a lot of the fan art that I've looked at, not recent fan art, but stuff back in the 90s that would come out in their Star Wars Insider magazine and things like that, role-playing books, just things that I was looking at, just going over and over in my adolescent or in my teen years. I'm looking down because I have a couple of examples I just want to show you that they capture some of the iconography in this episode. I thought it was really cool. One of the famous ones, there's not a famous one. One of the ones I remember seeing is this one for a long time, and then they captured these two shots that very much captured the feel of that one. I thought that was really cool. He wakes up inside the pit. Has to kind of fight his way. The idea of a stormtrooper being in there, at first I was like, why the crap is there a stormtrooper in the Sarlacc pit? But then I remembered, oh yeah, in the first movie they were looking for the droids, and they were looking all over the desert, and it's very likely they would have, I'm sure there was a conversation with the Empire and Jabba the Hutt. That'd be a cool story to write, because he was like the main muscle and the main organization on Tatooine, and if they're looking for something as big as the droids, and they would have talked to him. It's very likely that they would have scoured out that direction, and Luke wasn't super far from the pit of Carkoon. He was aware of it. He used to jump over it in his his speeder bikes and stuff as a kid, whatever. Yeah, that was this little stunt they used to do, but they captured that kind of stuff. It was really cool. I liked how they did that. They caught that image, the idea of the stormtrooper having to cut and breathe his mask, his air. That was awesome. For him to get some fresh air before he climbed out. Really cool. Those were neat. And then the next one is this famous picture. And this, I don't know if this is the exact one, because this looks a little weird, but it was the same concept. I remember this being like a really big deal in the 90s as well. Just the idea of Boba Fett being able to crawl out of it, and that created all the speculation of how he could do it. All this, if you read the stats about his armor in the role-playing game back in the 90s, it had all this stuff about how he very much could have resisted the toxins and everything of the Sarlacc pit and his indigestion system. But they did capture that too. Just that moment, just that image of him crawling through and crawling out of it. Very well done. And then this one's one of the most famous pictures I remember. This is art from back in the 90s when who had the comics? Dark Horse Comics had them, and this is the kind of art that was done on those beautiful comic covers. And this isn't from an issue, I don't think, but I can't remember the name of the artist that did some of my favorite ones from the Dark Empire series, David something, I think. But anyway, this is the same feel, and this was the idea that he could have crawled out and killed it, and I didn't get a picture because I didn't go get my own screenshots. I just took whatever was on our YouTube from this morning. But his using the flamethrower on it was also in the episode where he punched through it and like burned. I don't know if he was burning a hole like to burn the sand, the cavern or whatever, the gas chamber in his stomach to make a way for him to fight his way out. I don't know exactly what he did because he didn't come out of the mouth, he came out from the side. But whatever, he used the flamethrower in there. It's just kind of cool. They capture a lot of that stuff. As far as the story itself, I didn't like the escape from the Starlight Pit, which obviously they had to tell that. I'm glad they did it, but they didn't. It didn't feel like it was. I don't like him just sitting in a Bacta tank, just having these visions that were so long and detailed. That was my thing. Have him go through the story of this episode, him walking and traveling or whatever, talking to the people, and have him go off in little daydreams is fine. Having a little image, like in The Mandalorian when the guy had the Mando had that one flashback of him being put in that little canister or whatever during the attack and the droids finding him or coming in to attack him. They kept showing that same thing, but it was just little clips. It was just really, he kept having flashbacks, but it was just to that one thing. He didn't have flashbacks of this whole big narrative of how he escaped, and if there was like a dream, whatever. Jawas found him, and then he was raised by Tusken Raiders. I knew that was going to happen because I figured that when we find him with Tusken Raider gear, I didn't feel like he escaped the Starlight Pit and killed a bunch of Tusken Raiders. I always felt like in the Mandalorian setup, I mean, he escaped and he was probably revived and taken care of by them, kind of like the Lone Ranger being raised by Tonto's tribe is kind of the vibe I got, because he kind of felt very primitive when he was retracing and trying to get back his armor and his ship in Mandalorian, and that was fine. But him having a dream to tell that whole background, well, that was kind of weird. I liked that. I liked him holding his little court, people coming in. The characters were interesting. I like that he just had the one torture droid, and he makes the comment, we need to find a protocol droid, because as we know, not everyone speaks Huttese, and that's the thing. In the original trilogy, and the concept was that Jabba the Hutt, as the gangster, was in charge, and most people tried to learn and speak Huttese to him. Protocol droid would interpret, unless he got frustrated with the translation, then he would, kill the messenger. But it seems like even, Anakin as a kid, as a slave, he was speaking Huttese to Watto, who wasn't a Hutt. And, so I mean, that was just kind of the overall language, the secondary language besides basic was to learn Huttese. Now it's Boba Fett, and it's a long time, as well as 5 years later, so I don't know how much people are going to walk around speaking Huttese, and I'm sure Boba Fett speaks Huttese. I can't think off the top of my head if he ever did in the movie, or interpreted it. Actually, he did. I'm going to say he did, because when Bausch was in there with when they were having the conversation with Luke, Boba Fett was going into position and readying himself. And when Chewbacca was in there with Bausch, it seemed like from the conversation, which was in Huttese, wasn't it? Pretty sure it was. No, it wasn't. I'm sorry. I'm completely wrong. Bausch was not speaking Huttese. 3PO was interpreting it with the subtitles, because he kept saying 50,000, no less, all that stuff. Boba Fett was positioning himself, so I'm going to say I think Boba Fett. Well, I could look up in here and tell you if he speaks Huttese, but I don't care anymore. This is going on way too long for your interest and my interest to share it. But anyway, the court was cool. I thought it was cool seeing Jabba the Hutt's bedroom. I'm assuming that was his suite, except for as that big, huge open bay window, it'd make it very easy for someone to get in and assassinate Jabba the Hutt. I'm sure he had a lot more protection, especially in the role-playing games, in the old ones. They went into a lot of elaboration on how secure Jabba's palace really was. A lot of perimeter sensors and everything from miles away. Like, there's no way anyone could just approach. Like, the two droids, they knew they were coming the whole time. You don't just walk up and knock on Jabba the Hutt's door. They know you're coming. But yeah, that bay window is kind of interesting. It was cool seeing the throne. The throne room again was really cool. Then they went to, I think that was Mos Espa. It was interesting how Mos Espa is thriving and popping with business and everything. Everything's going well. When it showed Mos Eisley, completely, economically struggling, especially the cantina, which was the hot spot prior to the events of the. Well, I don't know if that's an influence from the rebellion, or the rebellion, the downside of the empire, or the crime lord business, all the gangster and the transactions and the traffic that was happening because of the smuggling ring and all the work that was being done from Jabba's networking. I don't know exactly what the reason for the downfall was. We had a conversation about that too on Saint Sun Cinema about those episodes. But anyway, it was cool seeing a thriving city. I didn't like the fight in the street. I hated it actually, because Boba Fett, even broken down and tired and overweight Boba Fett, and he's fine. He's not like super overweight that was like difficult to watch or anything. That was like, that's not Boba Fett. It's fine. But he is not going to get into a situation where, if people actually study the character, where he's going to be attacked and flanked on all sides with that pala flanks or whatever they call that strategy where you have the big shields, you move in on him. Boba Fett is sitting there with his jetpack on. Unless it's just for show, that thing works. So he could have shot out of there. There's nowhere, and it's not like he has this big loyalty to the assassin that he's going to stay in there and like where both of them are going to die, because he'd rather die with her than escape and fight back to get her or to help her. It's not going to work. He would have blasted right out of there. He's not going to be entrapped, and he would, then he would start taking them out from a distance and then move in. That's how he works. Instead of just sitting in there, just getting attacked and beat up and everything until the Gamorrean guards come in. And where were the Gamorrean guards for the first 2 minutes of that fight? Wasn't very well done. I didn't like it. He beat up and he instantly needed to get to the Bacta tank, and that just tells us if Boba Fett is in need to be in a Bacta tank regularly, that's a pretty big deal. He is struggling, and I think I don't think he's gonna die from a battle. I think he's gonna die in this story. Naturally, he's gonna do something noble because he's got to honor the character, or the fans of him as a person, as a character, and for the fans or people that just love him as a villain. I think his vendetta should be against Luke, not Han Solo, because it'd be a terrible idea if they try and do anything with Han Solo in this story, especially you can't. How are you gonna film that? But we could have said the same thing with Luke Skywalker, but they pulled that off amazingly. But seeing him crawl out of the Starlight Pit, Han Solo is not as critical to him as a target and a rivalry now as Luke Skywalker. That's going to be the prize. So I think he's going to do something noble, give up whatever, and make some kind of a sacrifice or some kind of a forfeit or whatever. Do something noble or heroic, and he's going to die, but not from a battle. I don't think he's going to get a shot or anything. I think he's going to succumb to those injuries and wounds and sicknesses that he had from the Starlight Pit. But in the role-playing games, they talk about him having that Sarlacc toxin poison. Their stats for Boba Fett before and after the Sarlacc Pit because of how messed up he is. I'm sure they're going to take a cue from that stuff as well. I'm calling it right here. That he's going to have some sickness that's going to be the cause. His body feebly collapsing on himself in his life. That's what's going to happen. It's not going to be from a battle or a wound or an injury or fighting Luke Skywalker or anything like that. Anyway, the rest of the episode, I didn't mind it. I like the idea that different people are treating him a little differently than they did Jabba and Fortuna. I like the Gamorrean Guard story. Even though they're just fat guys with masks, them being shirtless, that's maybe for that first shot, but put some clothes on when they go out. Not because I'm offended by it, it's just they don't look Gamorrean. Even their guts don't look like the Gamorrean guts. I mean, you look at those costumes originally, you look at the way these guys are just like fat guys. It doesn't seem right. Gamorrean guards have very squatty, plump, very round, tire stomachs. Not just regular fat guys. So I didn't really like how they left them like that. And they seem very athletic, which they are. Gamorrean guards are very strong and they're stout. They're not just these slugs that they seem like, these pig guards. And even pigs are very strong. They had the fight in the street that was done. The parkour scene I was fine with. Him or her leaving one prisoner. Cool. See who they were working for. Probably the one mayor that didn't get the respect they deserved. I like that character, by the way, the mayor's servant. Was there anything else to really talk about? Boba Fett's there. Him walking around without his mask. I don't like that. Not because it's a Mandalorian thing, but maybe that's one of the reasons they did it. But Boba Fett, it was always about iconography, or his image, his look, his public image. Him walking around without his mask is going to make him look a lot more feeble and everything than he would have otherwise. The armor is very specific, is very rare, is very precious, and his is iconic because of the paint and everything on it. Him walking around with black robes or whatever, and I like his new outfit. It's okay. It's not as cool as the original, but I'll always love the original most. But his going around in the armor is without the helmet. It just exposes that he's an older man, that he's burned, he's wounded, he's feeble, and I think it's gonna detract from the respect that he's saying he's gonna rule with. That's what he said. Jabba the Hutt ruled in fear. He's gonna rule in respect. Maybe there's something to him showing his face, that he's gonna be like, look, I'm willing to look you eye to eye, instead of being like this mischievous shadow in the dark with this faceless character that you can't see. That's more menacing, and he's like, I'm trying to get your respect and work with or deal with you, not deal against you or deal cunningly from behind the scenes to take you out. Fine, but Boba Fett, in a lot of cool stories in the old canon, in the Legends now, he always had a thing about not showing his face. It was very important, and anyone who saw his face died, not because of like some nobility of his anonymity, his remaining anonymous, but just because it was like his thing. His image, his public image, was in the mask. There was a scene in one of the Tales of the Jedi, or Tales of Jabba's Palace. It was Tales of Jabba's Palace, where he was in his guest chamber during the Return of the Jedi events, and Princess Leia in her slave garb was brought to him as a present from Jabba the Hutt, for him to have as a sex toy for the night. And Boba the Fett was wearing his helmet in his like boxer shorts. He was like in his underclothing wearing his helmet still. He sat down and wore his helmet with his gun trained on her while he slept. And he slept on the floor, she slept on the bed. He didn't do anything because he said any or sexual activity between or from unmarried people, whatever it was, from unmarried people is immoral, is what he said in the book. It's really cool. Anyway, so he's a chaste man, but he even wore his armor in his helmet in there, watching her sleep while he slept. There was other sequences where he had to go into places without his armor, and anyone that saw him died if he had to go into somewhere that could detect metal or sensory or energy, things like that. He had to infiltrate with like a bow and arrow or a spear or something and kill them. Those were not going to be people that were going to be hunted and bounties taken in. They were assassin kills. So he was always very careful about his image. For him to walk around like this looking feeble, I don't really like that. Nothing else really bothered me or really excited me. I liked the torture droid being there. I liked the court session. The sandcrawler stuff is fine. His killing the one big thing. Well, I saw that coming, you know. I thought he was just gonna have a fight with the thing, but it was like the kid. Why are they sending a kid with the one dog? And I like the dog. The dogs are from episode 2 when Anakin was, or episode 3. Episode 2. I don't remember. I swear they showed the dogs. I had action figures from the episode 2 toys. The sandcrawlers. It showed a couple of the sandcrawlers. Sand people had a couple of them with those the little dogs with the spikes on their back. That was kind of cool. The Rodian was kind of funny. I like that he couldn't really understand it. He couldn't talk to it. The sign language with the Tusken Raiders in this one, I liked it better than the Mandalorian. It was a lot more vague gestures. It was not like a specific. You know, I liked it a lot more. Overall, it's really cool. I'm excited to see where it goes. I want to see him like just plant his make his stamp, and then figure what his agenda is. He was never about power and rule. If that's his new thing, fine. He'd be like, whatever. I'm just gonna retire. He was always he was like the richest freaking bounty hunter. He was the most successful, most popular, most dreaded, most feared, most respected, and he had the most success. Like he had all the biggest contracts, including Han and Luke. So for him to just be like, well, I'm just gonna retire and chill out on Boba's or Jabba the Hutt's throne, it's fine. It works. It's just it's not. He was always about like the next kill. It was always about the job. It was his lifestyle. It was always about the hunt. That he had like something to prove. He wanted to be the greatest, and he was, but he wanted to maintain that status. Maybe it is time for him after the Sarlacc pit incident. I can imagine he was like, hey, maybe enough is enough. But it doesn't seem like he just wants to chill out and just do nothing and be money and have money. That's not the point. Even the tribute, he's like, why didn't they bring a tribute from the mayor's servant? It wasn't about I need this money. It was a gesture and it was an insult. So I don't know. Interesting. It's interesting to see what they're doing, and I'm fine. I don't feel like I was like, this is not my Boba Fett. That's not the point. I like some of the ideas and the characterization that came from the original stories. A lot of the expanded universe stuff was really good with Boba Fett. Very, very good. And people that argue that the only reason people like Boba Fett is because of all the books and in the comics and everything, not true. He did enough awesome stuff in the movies. And I remember reading a post a couple years ago when everyone's like, oh, Boba Fett just looks cool. It's just cool armor. That's all he is. And I was like, no. And I went off on all the amazing stuff that he showed as his character did in the original trilogy. And it shut them up. They couldn't even respond. They're like, huh, I never thought about all that stuff. Because he did a lot. Anyway, Boba Fett, the Book of Boba Fett, Stranger in a Strange Land. It's pretty good. I'm excited. Can't wait till next week to see the next one. Sorry this took so long. You could have watched half the episode in the time I talked, most of it. But very good, and I liked, again, the imagery, the capturing some of this flame art, or the art from the old days. You can't even see them all. Put them out of place. It was very well done. So, anyway, whatever. Book of Boba Fett, I'll review. I'll discuss the next one next time. But for now, thanks for watching. That's Tim Wilde and his wild thoughts. Boba Fett, Stranger in a Strange Land.